Falcon Spoke, A Tale of Ancient Egypt by Alex Wynne Ashwood. Dawn come the Nile into light, and the stone of Edfu took on its first colour, pale gold along the pylon, cool blue in the hollows of the courtyard. Nebet, priestess of 45 years and 20 harvests of service, moved through the Terrace rites with a body that knew the steps before the mind spoke. Incense to the east, libation to the west, hymn under breath. She had taught 3 generations of acolytes to keep their hands steady and their eyes on the horizon. This morning the air felt cleared, as if the god had opened a window. When the hymn's last note thinned, a single falcon feather settled at her sandals. No bird above, no wind to bring it, a clean quill tipped in sun. Nebet did not start or call for signs. She only bent, lifted it between finger and thumb, and set it across the lip of the libation bowl, as one might place a reed on still water. The young priest beside her whispered, "Omen?" Nebet watched the feather steady itself against the rim. "A message," she said, voice level. "We will learn the words." By mid-morning the Nile had turned from pewter to hammered silver, barges dragging shadows downstream, while the quay uncoiled with sailors and boatmen. Nebet walked the river road, with her veil pinned back and her collar muted under dust, listening the way a priestess listens, past words, toward weight. They spoke of boats that vanished near the ford 2 bins below Edfu, no wreckage adrift, no crocodile spume, only a quiet where oars should have rung. A boy traced the eye of Horus in spilled grain and crossed it with his heel. "A black wind," someone said. "A curse," said another. Above them the sky was pure and empty, which did not comfort her. She stepped to the water stairs and let the river damp her fingers. It was running fast but not wild, the kind of current that carries a vessel clean if the name of the crossing is rightly spoken. A falcon cry threaded the noise of the quay and faded before any head could tilt to find it. Nebet lifted the hem of her linen to keep it out of the scum line, and in that same breath something familiar pricked the skin between her shoulders, the feeling of being weighed from above, as if a gaze moved with her shadow. She turned, saw only light on water, then gathered the feather from dawn into her palm. "All right," she said to the river under the bustle. "If there is a message, I am listening." The hypostyle hall held its own weather. Cool shade, the smell of stone and smoke, columns rising like date trunks to a ceiling painted with stars half faded by incense. Overseers unrolled wreaths of figures. The high priest stood with his hands folded at the navel, a posture that meant gravity without decision. Voices beat softly against the carved walls. "Close the gates. Blame crocodiles. Post guards at the fort. Wait for a safer omen." Nebet listened, the falcon feather laid along her palm like a slender oath, and felt the room measure courage in someone else's name. When the talk had looped back to the first caution, she stepped forward. "I will walk the ford," she said, voice even, with the hymn and the names under Horus. A murmur went the length of the hall. Too old, too bold, improper for a woman who teaches and does not test the river. The high priest's eyes thinned. "The temple cannot lose you to a rumor," he said. "Then lend me its protection," Nebet answered, and angled her hand so the feather caught a beam from the doorway and flashed like a drawn line on stone. "If fear is the beast, we will name it and lead it out." The priest did not nod, but did not forbid. That was the kind of yes the temple used when the god had already spoken. She left the terrace before the heat had fallen, walking south along the towpath while oxen chewed at their nose rings and boys let ropes slip from palms gone shiny with river salt. By the time Nebet reached the ford, the day had thinned to copper on the water and shadow in the reeds. A broken skiff lay half on the mud, its ribs sprung like a fish's, a thread of weed caught in the cracked prow. She crouched, touched the wet seam, found no tooth gouge, no churn of claws, only water's patient work on wood. Beyond, the current took a strange angle, gathering itself against a tongue of sand, as if forgetting the easiest route. She stood to her knees in the shallows and let the silk of the Nile press against her calves. Reeds bowed without wind. From nowhere visible, A falcon cry crossed the dusk and ended before echo could find it. On the mooring post nearest the deep, someone had scratched the eye of Horus, hurried and recent, a mark made to be seen in fear and remembered in hope. Nibet raised the feather once, not as charm but as answer, then set it behind her ear and began the falcon's path under her breath, low notes that kept step with the river's pull, as if naming each hidden stone by its old name. The water listened, or seemed to. No crocodile came, only the Nile, angled and waiting to be called. A stone wayside shrine kept watch above the ford, its niche painted with stars gone to dust, its lintel scored by years of hands. Nibet cleaned the little altar with reed plumes, set bread and beer beneath the faded sign of the falcon, and lit a wick in a clay lamp. Night gathered along the water in long, slow bands. The broken skiff creaked once as the current turned. The eye of Horus on the mooring post stared without blinking, rough and recent. She unpinned her veil, smoothed her pleated linen, and laid the morning's feather under the lamp as one lays a measure across a board. "If fear is the beast, I will measure it," she said, and the river did not disagree. Sleep came like a tide that forgets the shore. In the dark behind her eyes, a single wing beat pressed the air flat, then again, nearer. A watching eye opened where the ceiling should be, not painted but present, and everything in the shrine turned its face upward. The bread crust, the lamp flame, even the cool stone. Nibet stood inside the dream without moving, and felt a shadow falcon pass over her so slowly that the room cooled, as if a cloud had crossed the sun at noon. No words yet, only the sense of aim, of something narrowing to a point, as if the god were drawing a line from sky to water and asking her to hold it steady until dawn. The next dawn came veiled in silver, the river pale and smooth as unfired clay. Nibet stepped from the shrine, barefoot, linen cool against her legs, the feather once more between her fingers. No one followed her to the ford. Even the boatmen stayed well upstream. The silence carried weight, like a wall across the current. She waded in, slow enough to let the water memorize her shape, until the hem of her dress clung to her thighs and the bottom sand pressed cold against her soles. She raised her chin and began to speak the hymn of the falcon's path, the oldest river charm she knew. It had no fear in it, only the rhythm of wings. The reeds leaned toward her as she spoke. A breeze stirred the feather, but not the trees. Light flickered across the ford in long white threads, but there was no crocodile churn, no skiff, no sound but her voice and the hush after. The current tightened, pulling inward to the sand tongue, as if the river were listening and waiting for its name. Nibet closed her eyes. "I give you what is yours," she said, and with both hands laid the feather flat on the water. It didn't sink. It turned once, slowly, and drifted toward the deepest part of the ford, where the shadow waited to be named. The feather stopped moving. The current stilled, as if the Nile itself had drawn in a long breath and was waiting. Mist unfurled along the ford, soft gold in the dawn, and the air turned keen and bright, like the instant before a hawk strikes. Nibet opened her eyes and felt something enormous and weightless settle above the water. Out of the mist came the falcon, broad-winged, its feathers edged with light, its chest marked by the eye of Horus gleaming like the sun disk. It did not flap. It simply hovered, its shadow spreading over the ford like a canopy. The river bent around its reflection as though remembering an older shape. When it spoke, no beak moved. The voice entered the air itself, low and clean, cutting through mist and water. "This place remembers its name. They have forgotten it. Speak the name, and the fear will go." The feather on the water quivered, not from wind but from the weight of meaning. The falcon's gaze locked on her, clear, amber, sharp as sunlight on stone, and the mist pressed in closer, not threatening but expectant. Nibet's heartbeat found the rhythm of wings she could not hear but felt in the marrow of the river. When the light faded, the river was just river again, a soft hiss on sand, a curl of foam at the skiff's bow. No sign of the god, but the memory ringing in her bones. Nibet walked back to the temple barefoot, water drying on her calves, the feather returned to her hand, heavy now and meaning though light in weight. She did not speak. The younger priest saw the look on her face and moved aside without asking. In the cool of the temple library, she found what she had carried all along, the old hymn of the ford, pressed in fading ink on the inner wall of a forgotten niche. She read it aloud once, and the stones remembered with her. At first light the next day, she stood at the head of a small procession, not grand, only those who still believed in old names. 2 acolytes carried linen bundles. 1 priest bore a tray of unlit lamps, and behind them came the boatmen, quiet, rope calloused, their fear curled like rope around their wrists. Nibet wore no veil, only the feather across her brow. And when they reached the ford, she raised it so the dawn broke along its quill. "Horus has spoken," she said. "We will answer in the old tongue." And the river seemed to tilt, almost imperceptibly, as if listening for the next word. At noon the ford breathed differently. The mist was gone, the sky sharp and blue, and the water moved as though it had finally remembered its path. Nibet stood to one side, feather lowered, as the boatmen pushed their skiffs into the current with no tremor in their hands. The river, so long tense and narrow, opened itself like a wing unfolding. One by one the boats slid across the ford, ropes uncoiling smooth, poles steady. There was no sign of darkness now, only the hiss of oars and the bright chatter of water on wood. On the far bank someone laughed without fear, and the sound ran down the Nile like light on a blade. That night the temple lay quiet beneath the stars. Nibet slept on her mat with the window open to the river, the cool air moving through the reeds like a hymn she had always known. Her hands were folded beneath her cheek, the feather tucked against the wall, and for the first time in many weeks, the Nile sounded like itself, steady, full, untroubled. In her dream, she stood once more on the Terrace of Edfu, but the river below was silver, and the sky was alive with the beat of wings. Horus, in his falcon form, hovered above the temple pylons, his shadow stretching over the court like a banner. He looked down at her, eyes bright and steady, then rose into the stars without sound. The feather lifted with him, light as breath, and the falcon spoke, a tale of ancient Egypt,